Welcome back to the channel, Warhammer Man Studios. I'm Warhammer Man, and today we're going to be working on our Prophecy of the Wolf. We're going to do our orc half, and in the previous video, we did just a little bit of magnetization for Ghazghkull Thraka, and now in this video, we're going to go through and work on painting the armor, and then basically just breaking him down into various bits, and progressing through him. So essentially what we're going to do in this one is just get started with the black of the armor, and then we're just going to go from there. So we're just essentially went through and did like chaos black already on it, and now we're just going to get a little bit of our dark reaper, and then we're going to do a dry brush of that dark reaper over the areas we did black. And that's going to give us essentially our armor first like layer, and then we'll kind of progress more towards like a white away from like the blue or the gray, but that's basically where we want to start at. So and it's important that when you do a dry brush that you do it on like cardboard or like paper towel or something like that, because that basically like absorbs away like the moisture and allows you to get like the actual like paint to like dry off and essentially just like catch on the edges. If it's like too wet, it's not gonna like work correctly how you're like trying to do it. So basically all you're just trying to do is you just want a little bit of the paint on there, and you just want to run it all over the place, and you're basically just looking for the paint itself to just catch on like the raised up edges, and then you'll go back later on and you'll do like one more dry brush, maybe something like this, and then we'll do like a controlled edge highlight or two that'll really like make it stand out and give it like that final direction. And you can kind of like focus those edge highlights on like certain areas, like for instance, like I like to do like a brighter edge highlight towards the face than I do anywhere else on the model, so that way like that part will always like stand out the most and kind of draw your attention the most. But we're basically just going to go through and do this on all the black, and you don't have to be like real specific. You just want to pay attention to like how much paint is on your brush, and then obviously like how much paint is getting left behind on the model. And it's always better to do less than more, because you can always go back and add a little bit more in, but it's harder to like take it away. But you can always like fix any mistakes you make with painting, which is one nice thing about it, is like how forgiving it is. But we always try to focus on like working forward and not backwards. So you don't want to have to be like undoing mistakes. You want to just be like going on to the next step. So, and you'll see like not just like the actual technique matters, but like the timing and stuff like that matters as well. So like when you focus on which part of the model is important, if it's going to be hard to like get to a certain part of the model, if you like focus on that first and paint that first, it's going to make like the easier parts that you get to like later on much easier to like paint without getting stuff all over that. As where if you start with like the easy stuff and then you're trying to like paint the hard to get stuff, you're going to be like making more mistakes and covering up like stuff you already painted, and then you end up having to like go back and correct that and fix stuff that you already done. As where if you do it the correct way, or like the more efficient way, you're starting with the hard to reach stuff, you're less likely to make mistakes and mess up like the like easy to get to stuff when you do that last. Now we did that layer of dark reaper. We're gonna go down and do the exact same thing now with our Thunderhawk blue, and we're just gonna do a nice little dry brush. But this time, instead of doing it all over everything, we're going to focus just a little bit more on specifically like the zenithal areas, like essentially like where the light would be hitting everything from the top. So I'm going to leave him like semi-assembled in this, and just kind of go through and do the exact same thing. So I'm just going to do essentially, it's just a light little dry brush, and there's not going to be a ton of paint left on here, and it's just real dry. It's just going to pick up on the edges and this is just going to be like the step before we go back through and do like the actual edge highlights. So, and we're just trying to pick up same exact thing we did before. We're just trying to pick up the edges, but just a little less with each stage. And you know, obviously in this case where the model's magnetized, we can kind of take them apart, but focus just on where like the top is going to be, or where the sun would be hitting it, or like the light source would be hitting the model from. And as we do like the underside, we're just going to do like less and less. But in this case, like for this step, I still want there to be just a little bit. And now here, like the top of the gun, we're going to focus just a little bit more of the paint there, because we want this area to be just a little bit brighter, because it's like the area that would catch the light. And then also we're going to brighten it up as well, because we're going to do like have like the gun barrels kind of like glowing from shooting so much type thing. Represent like the heat being emitted from them basically. But all this does is just like kind of picks out like the areas that would be getting hit the most by like the light, because the areas that are down in the cracks are not going to get hit by the paintbrush through like this step the same way that like obviously like the exposed areas are. And then when we go through after this and we do like the actual edge highlights, we'll be able to control those even more and only have them be on like the topmost areas, or like the area we want to be like the brightest. So it gives a little control, as where this is kind of like control but it's sloppy. And then I'm going to just pop off his backpack and just get a little bit back behind here. Alright, so now here we got Gaz, and we've done the Thunderhawk blue on top of the Dark Reaper. So we got those two basically just dry brushes, and we're focused it just a little bit towards like the zenithal, but now we're just going to pay a little more attention here with our actual edge highlights on the armor. And we're going to do like a 50-50 mix of the Thunderhawk blue with the celestra gray, and then we're just going to water it down a little bit so we get like a nice like smooth spread for it. And then we're just going to go and essentially just do edge highlights, but instead of just doing them towards everything, we're going to focus those edge highlights towards like the face and the topmost like raised areas, sort of like a zenithal lighting essentially effect. So, and then we're just going to kind of pay attention to the areas that are later going to get painted, where obviously we don't need to spend a bunch of effort, you know, doing unnecessary highlights right now. So. And because we have it in like so many pieces, we can take them apart like however we want as well, just like for convenience, which is obviously nice. And I'm just gonna take off a couple of the accessories, and we'll just kind of focus around like the main torso. And I'm just gonna kind of focus on where like the light would be most hitting the model. And whenever you're doing like a highlight like this, you're always looking to have like progressively less than like the color before. So wherever I'm adding in like the edge highlight, I'm gonna add in just a little bit less of an edge highlight than what's already there from like the previous layer of dry brush. And if you sort of move the model around so that your paintbrush is always kind of at like more of a convenient angle, uh, it'll like help to work with you rather than like fight to make sure that you don't like make any mistakes. So if you just pay attention to how you position your brush, it can help you out and be like more advantageous. Alright, so now we got the edge highlights done for the armor. And we're just gonna go ahead and go through and block out all the metallics. And you could like do a couple different metallics, but we're just gonna go ahead and do Leadbelcher for now on all of it. And then if we want to pick out like some coppers or gold or whatever later on, we can. So, and I recommend you just use like an old brush whenever you're doing like the metallics, just because it tends to like ruin the actual brush. So we're just gonna go through and basically just like block out any of the bits that are metallic in this case, which is basically just all the black parts that we went through like the first time and didn't do like our edge highlights on. But obviously like some of them got like the dry brush along the way. So we just want to go through and just put like a nice even coat on all these bits, and just be careful not to get on any of the parts that we already covered or that we already painted rather. What a cool model this is too. Like just getting to mess around with it and seeing all the detail that went into it and everything. Like absolutely amazing sculpt and everything. And just, two of the most iconic models like for me are the Ghazghkull Thraka, and obviously they killed it on this model. And then the other one is Abaddon the Despoiler. Abaddon or Abaddon is like one of the most like iconic models, and the old one was just so awesome. And then when the new one came out, I mean, just absolutely destroys like the old sculpt, in a good way, which is awesome. That's how it should be though. There was like how many years in between. But yeah, I mean, they totally killed it on this model. I'm sure like everybody can't wait to get their hands on this. And honestly, if you haven't seen them in person yet, the model's like even better in person. But yeah, we're just gonna go through, block out all the different metallics. And like I said, we just use like a rough old brush for this. It's gonna get ruined anyway. This one was already like ruined. And especially with the metallics, you know, if you're using like a palette or whatever, just make sure you water them down because they tend to like come very thick, especially from Games Workshop, depending on what brand paint you're using. But I would rather like water it down and do like two thinner coats if need be, but that's usually not even the case. You could usually water it down and then still just do like one nice coat, get like really solid coverage. A lot of times too, the Leadbelcher looks really good just dry brushed over top of black, and you don't even get like full coverage with it. It looks really good, but in this case, I'm gonna do probably like Agrax, Earthshade, or Seraphim Sepia, one of the Null and Oil, maybe combination of a couple of those to kind of like darken up, and then I'll go back through and do like actual painted on like edge highlights and everything like that on this specific model. But there's lots of other ways to like accomplish basically like the same effect depending on like what route you want to take, or how many steps you're willing to put in. Starting to get a little more detail there with the metallics. When I say use an old brush, this is the oldest brush. This thing's in rough shape. You probably can't tell in the video, but man, this thing's gotta go in the trash after this. Doesn't even have like remnants of a point or a tip or any kind of order to it. It just represents full on chaos. But since it's Gaz and Orks are chaos, I'm gonna let it go. I'll allow it. Starting to look pretty nice there. Keep going on that. I need to bust into another one because this is like the very end. Got a Leadbelcher right here. Yeah, what a cool model and so much detail like in every single part of it. Like the claw and everything has so much cool stuff to it. Tiny little bits like incorporated. I'm gonna have to do something to customize the base. Maybe like put some extra Gretchen or something like that on it. It is cool how they give you like multiple positions that you can put him in, and then you can like put the head on like two different like torso bust parts to make him like looking either way. If he's firing like his guns or kind of like bearing down with his claw, which is pretty awesome. And that's why you don't glue the claw right there. Look at that. Alright, so now that we went through and just blocked out all the metallics, including the parts that are going to get painted like different metallics later on, we just went ahead and painted all that gunmetal for right now, or Leadbelcher rather. And then we're going to go in now and pick out some of the other details, like the red for like the cloth and the little like teeth on his like face mask there, or jaw. And then also like we'll do like some lighter color for like the bone and the skulls and everything like that. So what we have right now is a little bit of the corn red right here, and we'll just water it down a little bit if we need to, just thin it out, and then we can do like a couple thin coats if need be, just to make sure that we get a solid coat on there and everything, and good coverage. So, but just for ease sake, we'll just go ahead and just get a nice coverage on there. And if you didn't do like the magnetize, that's not like a big deal or anything too. It just makes it a little bit easier, just to get to some of those hard to reach areas, and not have to worry about hitting the areas that we already like spent a bunch of time doing. And then if you do have any little touch ups or anything along the way, it's no big deal. Typically I find with Games Workshop's paints, especially their reds, they have no problem coating because they have so much pigment in them. But it's never a bad idea to do 2 coats. But typically, you're going to end up doing more than a couple coats anyway. If you're doing like a wash and then a highlight. As long as you get good coverage overall. Doesn't need to be 100%. Alright, so here we got Gaz now, and we went through and just blocked out all the colors other than, like, you know, obviously what we already painted. So all the metal's been blocked out silver. All the bone is just based with like a white, you know, red accordingly. And we're going to go through now and we'll basically do some washes to darken everything back up and give it like a little bit more of like depth. And then we're going to do edge highlights. Now alternatively, you could do like darker base color, like you could use like, you know, a light brown instead of the white, and then you could basically like dry brush. But because I already painted like the armor parts first, I would rather do washes because I can be like a little more like detailed with a wash, and it's easier to like pull it away if I need to, and then I can just add on like the edge highlights to get the detail. As where like the dry brush is a little bit more of like a messy technique, you can't be like as you know, as like clean with it, and I don't want to get like dry brush bits on the armor. Now in this case specifically though, it probably wouldn't be as much of an issue because we went ahead and magnetized everything, so it's like real easy to take apart and get to the little bits. But again, it's just not worth it. You know, you have like these different techniques in your arsenal to use in different situations, so that's what we're gonna do. And in this case, like, you know, using the dry brush early and then the edge highlights gave us like the sweet armor. So now we're gonna come in and use like our washes and you know, edge highlights to finish this job, and then alternatively we could do like the opposite style. So yeah, we're gonna wrap it up for now, and then we'll come back and we'll do like a second half to the video where we basically finish up all the other bits other than the armor, and then you know, we'll come in and darken up the armor a little bit and do some final edge highlights and complete Gaz and get them ready for the table. So there you have it, guys. Warhammer Man Studio, Ghazghkull Thraka, and I mean, he's already ready for the table as is, but you know, he definitely needs a little bit more detail as well. So Warhammer Man Studio, and I'm out of here.